I was 6 years old. I was new to the big city, and I was going to primary school for the first time. I get there, and there's this huge big sign up which says wet floor. So I did. And I got into the most terrible trouble. The teachers had absolutely no sense of humor about this at all. But it was okay because all the other kids laughed. And even though I didn't know a single soul, by the end of that day, I'd kind of got myself into some kind of little group. And I learned a really, really important lesson that day. That humor and laughter allows weird and wonderful things to happen. Even if one's got to resort to bodily functions to achieve the joke in the first place, you're going to get something going that wasn't going beforehand. So when I say to people, it's really worth going out of your way, going a considerable distance more than you would think doing in terms of your child rearing, in terms of bringing up children, which is what I'm going to be talking about briefly today. It's really worth going out of your way because laughter is the primary variable, the numero uno difference between good and great parenting. People say to me, well, you can't be serious. And I say, well, that's exactly the point. You can't be because it doesn't really work that well. And it hasn't really worked that well up to now. And in fact, in the 21st century, as we've seen from some of the other talks that people are outlining, it's working even less well. There's been a lot of studies and there's been outpouring of research that has been showing that a lot of what we do in our schools, and you saw in that an outpouring of research that has really shown that a lot of what we're doing in 21st century parenting and our schooling system is actively harmful to our children. Not just benign, but actively harmful. And yes, there's a fair amount of mass hysteria here and a little bit of, if you like, moral panic about how do we do things differently in this new age of where we're digitally connected, and is Facebook going to fry our children's brains, or is that actually the cell phone's job to fry our children's brains? People are trying to figure out how we adapt to this hyper-connected world, but there's a great deal of evidence to show, and emerging evidence that's coming out all the time, that the pursuit of material success, this kind of spiraling search for ever greater levels of status, producing very unhappy children, depressed teenagers, and ultimately strung-out adults. So we've got to start thinking differently and approaching things a little bit differently. And what are the solutions? What kind of areas can we start looking at that give us some kind of handle and approach that's going to be a bit different from the way it's been for hundreds of years? They're multifaceted, they're many, but they share this common dynamic of lightening up, of loosening things up. And they share this common dynamic of laughter. So William James, the father of American educational psychology and of American psychological movement, says we don't laugh because we're happy. We're happy because we laugh. So putting the primacy in that laughter, if you can go out there and get more laughter, I'm going to just sort of show you that, share with you some ideas about why and how powerful laughter can be, because it does four things, four interesting, wonderful things. Firstly, it allows us to think in ways that are much more attuned to the fast-moving 21st century. It's about creativity and about openness to innovation. So it gives us that innovative and creative edge. Secondly, it creates and forges and builds social bonds and really brings people together. Thirdly, it's about this adaptability that gives you a resilience, this bounce-back ability that's quite impossible to get from almost any other kind of source in one's life, that ability to go. And finally, one has new research, very exciting stuff that's been coming out this century about its impact on your health, on young people's health, on our immune systems, the stuff that's been going on in the last 2 or 3 years. I'm just going to share with you very briefly some ideas in terms of each of these. So creativity, you really can tell that you're going to be able to, by bringing more laughter into your upbringing and by your parenting skills, that you're going to have brighter, more intelligent, creative kids. The answer is yes, because laughter and humor, the fundamental basis of them is incongruity. It's about bringing together things that don't belong together and experiencing them in new ways. It's about yoking together the disparate into one unified thought and holding 2 or 3 or 4 thoughts in your mind at the same time. The very essence of creativity is also the very essence of intelligence. So you get someone like William Fry saying, the whole thing with creativity and humor is actually identical. The more we look at it, the more we see that these aren't separate paths. These are mutually reinforcing skills that are so useful and so powerful because they allow one to develop non-obvious connections. And that leads the philosopher John Morell to say that the way that this works, the mechanism through which this works, is through these loosening of these mental gears. It encourages out of the ordinary ways of looking at extraordinary things. And you can see there Einstein discovering that time actually is money, one of his less well-known formulas from Gary Larson. So in that kind of context, one sees this kind of ability to start to deal with different levels of things that don't necessarily belong together. My little daughter comes home from school, and there's been some stuff on the playground, and some kids were throwing rocks, and she's exhausted by the whole thing, a bit scared. So I said to her, why didn't the little bicycle stand up for itself when it was being bullied? She didn't know the answer. I said, because it was too tired. So it's like a little joke for a kid. I don't know where I got that from or why I got that, but it really helped her to just kind of deal with something. We'll talk about emotional resilience in a moment, but that idea, this is exactly what leads John Cleese to say, humor frees people up to have new thoughts. I mean, new thoughts, bicycle, bullying, exhausted. Somehow I was able to do that, and somehow she was able to do that. And the more we learn about the plasticity of the human brain, about how people develop those first 5 or 6 years, and again in the teenage years when the brain's synapses are almost entirely rewired, the more, if you can lay down this ability to grasp that which, the things that don't belong together, and be able to put them together, and you can do that entirely through laughter, the greater abilities to cope with this modern world where you need to be on your feet, where you need to be able to think creatively, where you need to be able to disconnect a wide variety of different inputs. The second really critical area, an interesting area, is around social bonding, around this thing of sociability and social skills. We are 30 times more likely to laugh when we're with other people. 30 times, not 6 times or 12 times or 18 times, 30 times more laughter when we're in a social group. And this is true even when you have laughing gas, nitric oxide. By yourself, it's kind of like amusing, but with 30 other people, you get into a whole different spirit of laughter. So we can do this with chemical add-ons or just with humor. Laughter is a social thing, and that social bonding comes from very, very early in the evolution of humankind. The research that's been done in the last 5 or 6 years about primate laughter, all of our primate ancestors and current cousins have developed laughter way before language. We now know that laughter predates language by about 1.5 million years. It was there, and we had the ability as proto-humans and early humans very early on to laugh, long time before we could actually speak to each other. And part of the social brain hypothesis, which is now very popular in certain academic circles, because it is so powerful, is to suggest we didn't evolve these large brains because we needed to master things like hunting and gathering and cooking. We mastered these things because we were living in larger and larger groups. And the large brain had to have the capacity in order to lubricate those relationships. And what's the greatest lubricator? Why have all the primates developed this primary essential ability to laugh? It's because laughter is a social lubrication. It also helps you when you've had stresses to deal with those stresses. Laughter is a wonderful, as we'll see in a moment, releaser of stresses. So when we were growing up, for hundreds of thousands of years of human history and proto-human history, little groups would be sitting around and you'd face real deadly dangers. You'd have this kind of walking past your cave, and after the danger had passed, humor is a wonderful way of dissipating that stress. And in fact, that gets me to the whole idea of resilience. Resilience and bounce-back ability comes innately from humor's ability to see the absurdity in life. It's a wonderful gift to give one's children a sense of perspective, that comedy and laughter really make sense about what's going on in the world. An ice cream cone the ice cream will often fall off the cone after the first delicious lick. Shoes do get lost. Favorite pairs of shoes do get lost, usually one shoe at a time. Bad stuff does happen, and humor helps to situate that absurdity. A little daughter, youngest daughter, once seemed scared, fears about going to the doctor, etc. So we say, well, why did the banana go and see the doctor, right? Because it wasn't peeling well, okay? Now that's, again, not for a modern audience like that, but a little 2-year-old, it just helped 3-year-old. It helped enormously in processing those fears. And we now have in our family 15 or 16 variations of that, with different fruits and different vegetables for different circumstances, dentists and other kind of scary stuff. So this emotional resilience and the bounce-back ability where children can actually process their fears and kind of think those things through is a really, really powerful gift to give one's children. The learning that laughter is kind of like a life raft. But it's a life raft that you can inflate when you want to. And it actually buoys you up in whatever kind of sea of troubles you might find yourself in. And in fact, Viktor Frankl, this is just us with the primate cousin, but Viktor Frankl, who's the next slide along, whose family died in the Holocaust, who himself survived the concentration camps. In his wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning, said that humor, more than anything else in the human makeup, gives us that ability to just rise above things, if only for a few seconds, even in the most dire circumstances. So if you're going off to the doctor, the banana jokes work, and they really just bring that element of resilience. And then finally, the whole research that has been done recently, we've always known that one of the killer apps of laughing more, just getting more laughter in your life, going out of your way, doing all kinds of things inside of your family, little exercises. Michelle Obama has introduced this whole thing about the rose and the thorn conversation. Talk to your kids in the evenings about one great thing that happened to them during the day and one thorny thing that happened. I like to call it the funny and the frustrating thing. What is the funniest, what is the weirdest thing that happens? It's often the teachers that do really interesting stuff. So you hear about what was the most frustrating thing? And you try and turn that frustration frown upside down with a little bit of levity in terms of that. But the health benefits that we've seen recently, we've always known that it reduces stress, that in fact, at a kind of cost benefit ratio, there's absolutely nothing you can do as quickly than an incredible belly laugh to get rid of stress. Stress is an amazing evolutionary adaptation. 10 seconds of stress when somebody cuts you off can put you in a very stressed out space with all sorts of ephedrine, various antibodies running through your system, the stressor chemicals. And there's no quicker way than a laugh to dissipate that in your system. There's one other way, but you need a partner for it. And you can't really do it in public. But well, I'm talking about yoga, of course. But yoga and yoga and meditation and exercise, in fact, they've shown don't necessarily even work as quickly as humor does. But the new work that's going on that is most exciting is really looking at the immune system and how the immune system is stimulated and built up through raucous laughter. So the more that one is able to do it, just the mere act of laughing, like William James said at the beginning, doesn't have to be, that's why you get all these laughing clubs that are developing all over the world, where you just laugh. You don't have to have any more reason than to just do it. Boost the levels of killer T cells in your system and a substance called immunoglobulin A, which if you know how to use that in a sentence, you had a better biology teacher than I did, but it's an absolutely vital antibody that allows us to avoid more and more of the winter colds and flus. So that stuff that is coming up now, the gift of physical health that we get. So basically, little children, we know, laugh about 400 times a day. And there's this wonderful saying, the arrival of a good clown in a village does more for its health than 20 asses laden with drugs. And we've kind of got very addicted to the asses bringing the drugs in and the drugs that we buy, rather than encouraging and motivating those clowns in our midst that can help us to see the world from a different perspective. And young kids laugh about 400 times a day. It's an amazing statistic, and that's how they develop all those abilities to see things differently, the social bonding that laughter brings, the creativity. When we get to be adults, we're getting down to about 12 times a day. And that's if you're lucky to have that fortunate dozen where you're able to do it. So I want to say to you, spend money on funny, try and bring more humor into your life, but particularly for those of you like me who parents, reintroduce and go considerably out of your way to develop the context, the capability, and the opportunity for your children to laugh more. We all want to bring out and bring up the laughing child. Thank you.